Hi there, this is Dr. Matthew Ellinwood calling into the interwebs via Facebook Live for a pie making class. I have to have my coffee, it's still kind of early in the day. So, my name's Matthew Ellinwood, as I said. I am the Chief Scientific Officer for the National Mps Society. That's this little purple ribbon here. The MPS Society is a society dedicated to a rare disease, and we are dedicated to family support, advocacy, and research to help find a cure for these devastating diseases. As part of our fundraising effort this fall, we've had a virtual bake sale, and I'm here for a cooking class. I'm going to teach you, since the holidays are coming up, I think, nice, easy, foolproof approach towards apple pies. This may not be the best crust in the world, but it is certainly easy and it is about bomb-proof when it comes to the particulars of putting this pie together. I think a lot of people have anxiety about making pies. There are so many questions about what kind of crust do you use, what kind of flour, what kind of shortening, do you use lard or butter, or Crisco or oil, all these kinds of questions. And then there are the apples, like, what do you do? There are just too many questions. Well, I want you to approach cooking with no fear whatsoever. It's gonna be food. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be tasty, right? So, we'll start first with apples. You could go this route. I'm gonna go into my kitchen cabinet. You could go this route, which is just buy apple pie filling, but that's kind of dull. So what I suggest you do is you go to the market, right? You can go to the market and you can select any of a number of apples here. So I have a bunch of apples. We have Arkansas Black, Mutsu, which is a lovely post-World War II Japanese cultivar, Granny Smith, which came from Australia in the 19th century. It grew in a trash heap. Macintosh. Stamen, which is a very common apple in the East Coast, even though it came from Kansas. And Cortland. So I bought all those apples yesterday, and I baked them up. You know, you just core them, put them in a pan, and put them in the oven. And I really like to do that because I want to know that the apple I buy at the store is going to perform up to standard, right? And for me, the structure of the apple is really important. Nobody wants an applesauce pie, right? You want an apple pie with pieces of chunky apple that are good. So I want to see that the apple maintains structure and that has good flavor. And apples are kind of like wine grapes. Where they're grown, how they're grown, the season they're grown, all have an effect on them. So you may think Mutsus are great apples. By the way, Mutsus are grown in this country. They're called Crispin. And they're lovely apples. I discovered them at a farmer's market in New Hampshire when I was spending Thanksgiving with my cousin Kate. I know a cousin of mine, Lucretia, is here today. Welcome, Lucretia. I love Mutsu apples, but you know, I baked up a Mutsu the other day. It exploded. It was like a big ball of applesauce. Nix Mutsu. Really, the best performer was the Stamen. And I remember discovering Stamens when I lived in Philadelphia during my postdoc. They're a lovely apple. They are originally from Kansas, developed by a Dr. Stamen in the 1860s, and they became very popular in Virginia and along the East Coast. I discovered them, as I said, first off when I was in Philadelphia. And so that's what I chose. It had the best balance of structure, maintaining structure when cooked, and flavor, which I really like. And I really like a bitter apple. The kind of apple that I actually really love are pippins, but I did not see any pippins at the grocery store or at the farmer's market. And I haven't seen any for a while. I don't know whether they've torn up those orchards and filled them full of Honeycrisp or something like that. Would be a shame. So one of the first things you do is you got to start cutting your apples, right? And what do you do to make sure the apples don't turn yellow while you're cutting them? Well, I'll show you. There is a great little tip. When you are cut any surface of a vegetable and it turns brown, that's actually oxidation. You're opening those cells of the plant by cutting and releasing things that will oxidize the fruit, and then that will tend to, nothing worse than a knife that's not sharp, honestly. That's a bit too big. That will work. So what will prevent that oxidation? Acid. And what will make it taste good? A lemon. And lemons have citric acid. So I love my trusty lemon squeezer. I just go ahead and squeeze a whole lemon into the pot or the pan or the bowl where I'm going to be making my apple slices. And I'm generous, you know, don't be ungenerous when it comes to lemons. They are the best thing in the world. So this is a good time to talk about how we actually taste food and what makes it good. So you may think that all of the rich taste that you experience in the world is from your tongue. Not true. Your tongue only tastes 5 things, right? Sour, sweet, bitter, salt, and umami. Like everybody knows what sour, sweet, bitter, and salt is, but what's umami, right? I'll tell you what umami is. You know when your mom makes that really wonderful stew and she cooks it all day and you eat it and you go, umami, that's good. No, that's not really what it means. It's a Japanese word and it means savory. So it's probably a breakdown product of an amino acid. Those are all the things you can taste, right? What gives all the sensation to, or real subtlety to a food is your nose, right? And there's a wonderful cook out there. His name is, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. He just came out with a book on smell and what it does for our enjoyment. Oh, Harold McGee, that's right. He does a great cookbook on science and cooking. Highly recommend that. And he has a new one on the importance of olfaction or our sense of smell. That is really what gives us all the special elements that we think of when we think of special kinds of foods. Because what we can actually taste is pretty limited. But, as I said, one of those things is sour, which is really the same thing as acid, right? Which is the same thing as lemon juice. So, here we've got our lemon juice. I'm going to reorient this so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've got my apples and my lemon juice, and I said these are stamens that I'd already decided I really liked. That's S-T-A-Y-M-A-N is the name of those. And you go to any farmer's market, certainly on the East Coast, you're going to be able to find these apples, right? So I'm pretty good with a knife and with peeling these guys because I've done it forever. But you do want to remember when you're peeling and using a knife, don't move the knife. Move the fruit, right? That will make you much safer when you're working with this. We'll also have another safer alternative as well to show you. There we go. These are really nice apples. I don't know why they got a little bit of bruising on them. Same thing, when you're cutting the core, move the apple, don't move the knife, right? And also choke up on the knife so you're protecting everything. I don't want to have to go to the hospital in the midst of my show. Also, when you split the apple, I like to open it like that, so I'm not really cutting. Then you can just pry it open. Get that core taken care of. Get rid of that. And then I'll quarter this, and we'll put it into the lemon juice so it stays nice and good, right? There we go. Now, if you really don't want to do all that, there is this gizmo, and we used to use this apple peeler and core when I was a boy, and oh my gosh, it is the coolest thing. Pies are, I think, great things to entertain children because there's so much going on, and it's a great way to get them interested in cooking and learning about it, and they're going to love this gizmo. So this is a incredibly cool apple core, and I had one of these. We had one of these in the house when I was a boy. Can everybody see that? Good, yes. So it's suction, right? And this looks like some medieval torture device. It's just, there are all these things going back and forth. It's so cool. So what you do is you pull this back. You do need to, where'd my knife go? You do need to cut a little of the peel off the top. That's not too bad. And a little of the peel off the bottom. Sorry, getting out of your line of sight. There we go. And then you just take this thing and you skewer it right on there. And it is so cool. Are you ready? Set. Oh, I love this. Watch, it's getting, oh my gosh, it's gonna happen. There we go. Oh, wow. This is the best. I just think that's so much fun. And look at this. You've got all this cool peel. Kids will love that. Great project to put them on. Okay, and so I just take a little bit of the peel off there. Got it, right? Got it there, there. Yep, cool. So that's another approach to peeling apples. And we'll add this to the apples here. Be careful. Ooh. Again, I'm moving the apples and not really moving the knife. I'm just going to quarter these guys. There we go. Okay, let's get that lemon juice in there so they don't turn brown. So I like to get my apples cut, and I like to put the sugar on them because then it sucks out the moisture and you know how much you're going to need to add in terms of flour. I really like to, weigh things because I don't like necessarily calculating, and I'm a grams guy. I hope that doesn't make me a communist, but I believe in the metric system. Okay, so I like, where's my cheat sheet? A half a cup of sugar is 100 grams. Make sure people still see me good. A half a cup of sugar is 100 grams. So I like a not too sweet pie. Average amount of sugar that people put into a pie is about a cup. I'm going to keep it at half a cup just because I really don't like that sweet a pie. I kind of think of sugar as a spice almost. You're adding it to brighten the food. Remember, it's one of those elements of taste. One of those 5 tastes is sweet. And it's there, I think, to brighten the fruit and not to make it sicky or cloyingly sweet. So there we go. We've got that added. I am a huge cinnamon fan. Where's my cinnamon? And where's my... I add a full tablespoon, and in gram measure, that comes to 10 grams. That's way more than many people will want to add, but I go ahead and add that anyway. Let's go ahead and tear that again. But again, as I say, I like a lot of cinnamon. Some people do not. And then I like to add some secret ingredients, which will be sort of aromatic spices. Think about spices for the holidays. I like to add a tiny bit of cardamom, a tiny bit of nutmeg, and a tiny bit of allspice. Now, one of the things I have discovered that I love is all of these pepper and salt shakers you get. You can empty them if you can, and then put things in them like allspice, so you can grind it fresh, which just makes so much difference in how it's, oh man, that smells good. It's just so much better that way. And here I have a grinder for just cardamom seeds. There we go, a little grind of cardamom. And then I have a grinder that I use for cloves. Just a little bit, not too much. My feeling is people should maybe sense it as a brightening of the flavor of the pie, but it should be anything that they sense is as necessarily cardamom or cloves, etc. Just a little bit of something. So what I'll do then is pretend that this is filled with 3 pounds of apples. 3 pounds of raw unsliced apples is what I use. And then I'll just put this in here and we'll wait on that to suck out all of the fluid of the apples. So pretend that is a full complement of apples, and I'm going to go set that aside, and then we'll start with the crust. Okay, so crusts, I make a oil crust, And I like this because it's fairly easy. You're not really rolling it out so much as you are pressing it out. And I find that it is a little bit more forgiving. And often when I'm making pies, I'm making 5 or 6, and then you can just go and get everything measured out and get it done, and you're ready to go. So what you'll want to use is a packed full cup of flour. I use just all-purpose white flour. Today I'm going to do something that is my own invention. Don't pay attention to me doing this. Just use a full cup, right? Just a full packed cup of flour. And then, but I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm doing a sort of an experiment today. Let's see, I'm doing it. Okay, that's 125 grams. What is this experiment today? I'm actually adding a little semolina flour, which is a kind of wheat flour. It's what they use for pasta. I'm doing that because I think that it adds a little bit nicer crumb texture to the pie, which I like, because this approach often tends to give you a pie that's a little bit less crummy than I like. Salt is important for the pie crust, because the fat that's in the pie crust, or some people will call it shortening, you really need some salt to go with that. So I'm going to add some salt here. It's about ½ teaspoon. Now, what you do, and this is fun for kids because they see this and they think it's cool, where I need a spoon. Whoops. There we go. I also need some caffeine. Okay. So you make a little mountain lake right here, and then there's a little valley. And in the valley, you will have a bunch of oil. It'll be like the La Brea tar pits, right? And you use a 1/3 cup of oil. If you're using a gram scale, it will be 74 grams. So I'm adding just vegetable oil. I'm going to add some 25 grams of butter this time too. I like using a weight because sometimes when you measure, the meniscus gets a little bit high over the measuring cup, and you may make some error. I'm going to add a little bit of butter to that, just to give it a buttery flavor. Now, there we go. There's my butter. There we go. Where's my spoon? There we go. Butter too. One more. Good. And then you add, let's see, you're going to add 3 tablespoons of ice water, right? 3 tablespoons of ice water. That also turns out to be 44 grams of water. And to that, you're going to add a tiny bit of vinegar, right? And the reason you do that is low pH inhibits the formation of gluten. And gluten is the enemy of a tender crust. So you add a little bit of acid to your water. That lowers the pH, and that means that this part of the water will not contribute to a tough crust. So it's going to be 44 grams, or 3 tablespoons. That's the way you do that. Okay, now I need a knife. Whoops. So gluten's formed by mixing, and that's one of the reasons, like when you're making a cake batter or a quick bread, you don't want to mix, because that just makes it tough, right? So I will mix this part of the flour with a little bit of water until we get into sort of a muddy goop, right? There we go, right? That's up in the mountains, and then there's the tar pits down below in the valley, and you mix that up. And then, because these are probably tar pits in Los Angeles, eventually there's going to be an earthquake, and the earthquake comes and everything gets all mushed together, right? So you're cutting it, right? You're not mixing it, you're cutting it together, and that is so that you don't mix it and you don't form gluten. But what you'll see here is I'm mixing bits of water and bits of oil, and water and oil don't mix, right? Duh. Excellent. So let's let that sit for just a second. Okay, and then I love using this stuff, and I was taught about this when I spent a year living in Germany. This is baking parchment, of course, and this revolutionized my approach towards making these pies, because I no longer lift the crust into the pie pan, I just lift the parchment paper, and it leads to a very different looking pie, but I think it's one that looks really attractive and unusual. So you've got your pie crust here, and you want to be really gentle with it. You don't want to do a lot of stuff to it, because again, that will form gluten. That will make it tough. Okay? So you kind of lift it out. Now, there you go. And this is just about right. It's maybe a little bit short, meaning too much fat in it, but we'll add some flour when we compress it. So I kind of flatten it gently into an oblong, right? And then I gently tear it, and I layer it, right? So we're going to create some layers in here, and in fact, depending on how tender it stays, we'll do up to 5 layerings, and that is basically 2 to the 5th power, which means we'll introduce 32 layers of fat and water, and that creates a flaky crust. So we've done 2. Again, gently pat it out, and you can see how it's marbling a little bit, and it's tearing. That means it's still tender, right? I like that. When it doesn't tear well, stop, because that means we're getting a little too tough. That was our 3rd one, I think. So I think we can tear. I think I'm going to go 1 more, and then I'm done. Okay? Cool. So then I will kind of squish up the sides so we don't get it too goofy on the edges. And I'll gently pat it out with my fingers. And I try to pat it so that there is kind of a volcano in the middle and then a mountain range all around. You see how that is? Right? And then I'll just put it on the parchment paper. And then with the middle parts of my fingers, I'll just move it out. You're always going from the center out to try and increase the diameter. And this is where you want to get your pie tin and make sure it's going to fit. Now I like to be I'm a big pie tin guy, so I like these 9-inch Pyrex. You can collect these at the local thrift shop. They've always got some, and then when you take a pie to a friend's house, you don't need that back. They can keep it, and you've got plenty more, and they are dirt cheap at the thrift store. So, cleaning up the edges just a little bit. See how there's that nice little marbling? That's going to mean that there's going to be flakes in that, right? And I think hopefully because I added some semolina, it's going to be a little bit more crummy than my usual. Crummy, not bad, as in there will be more of a crumb texture to it, which I kind of like, and I'm trying to introduce into my pie crusts. So, you seen how this works? I'm very pleased with the amount of oil I have. Your flour may behave differently depending on what you've bought and how fine it is. But I also encourage you to use a scale so you're keeping track exactly of how much oil you're adding, because I think that helps in terms of consistency. And again, this is an approach to get an apple pie that will be pretty fast. When I was baking these every week, when I was a vet student, I would bake pies on Thursday night to bring to rounds on Friday morning, because we always had breakfast rounds, I could make an apple pie in under 30 minutes from scratch. I was doing that, as I said, every week, so I got pretty good at it. Great, so you see that's looking pretty good, and we're almost at size. So this is where you take your rolling pin, and you're not really going to use the rolling pin to roll this out so much, it's just to flatten it, get rid of those ridges, right? And to maybe extend it a little bit. And again, we want to make sure that we're not getting any gluten in there, because gluten is the enemy of a tender crust. So what you'll do, got your rolling pin, just a little bit of flour there, not much. You never roll back and forth, right? None of this stuff. That's just going to introduce more toughness, right? So you always roll from the inside out to the edges, and that's why it's nice to have this parchment paper, because you can turn it so that you're always rolling from the center out. You see how that works? This is behaving really pretty nicely. I'm pleased. Sometimes there will be a little bit of that crust that gets picked up. You want to add some flour to keep it staying down, but not too much. The other thing about going from the inside is you're not going to pick up one of the edges and pull it off the paper, which is also helps to keep the pie crust integral before you get ready to put it together. Good, here we go. Super. Well, I'm really thrilled. This is working out nicely as a good demonstration. And you can see, I think, that modeling, that almost marbleized white and yellow of those layers of fat. And that's what gives it flakes. So when you eat a French croissant dinner roll, all those flakes are different layers of dough that were basically butter layers mixed with water layers. The same principle, except that also has a yeast component to it, whereas this has no leavening. This is an unleavened bread kind of approach. Crust. I think that we're going to be big enough. Let's check and see. I want it a little bit bigger. I want it just a little bit bigger. And I think we're going to be okay. And again, we're starting to get a little bit of loss there. I should probably put some flour on it. Yep. Don't want to. Now, I don't know about you. I still have not mastered a regular crust. So I guess I default to this one because I'm really incompetent in the other kinds of crusts. Some people like to use butter. Butter gives you a really sweet flavor. Lard actually is going to give you the lightest crust. It will give you the lightest shortening effect. Many people think lard's bad for you. Lard actually has less cholesterol than butter does. And it performs beautifully for pastry. And it has a very neutral flavor. Butter really does give you a nice taste. And then many people like to use Crisco. I think we're about, I think it's going to be good. So we'll set that there. Okay, and what you're going to do is just set this right here. And that's where you're gonna keep the crust, you're gonna cook it on basically parchment. And the other nice thing about this is you don't have to worry about drips on the bottom of your stove, and you don't have to worry about all that sugary stuff having to be cleaned off of your pie tin. So, and there's also another trick about this as well. So there we go, perfect, excellent. Excellent. Okay, now all we need to do is put the apples in and make the second top. So let's try the second one. Again, same deal. Where's our little scales? What did I do with that? Scales, scales. There we go. Oh! Scales. Okay, turn it on. Tear, tear. There we go. So 1 packed cup of flour is what you guys are going to use, right? And again, I'm experimenting a little bit because I want to try and get a little bit more of a crummy texture. So I'm using semolina, and I'm actually using that only for the fatty part of the crust. So I got to give credit for this crust. This was from my grandmother's cook, Carmen Leone, who did a wonderful job with this pie, and I dreamed about it all the time when I was younger, and I wanted to do it. So she taught me how to do this, and I have also added some of my own improvements. So let's see, we need to get our little mountain lake and valley tar pit set up. Okay, there we go. Where's our water? Let's get tared on that again. And we add 44 grams of water. Oop. A little bit more, but I think we'll be okay. Then we add 70 or so of, again, this will be 1/3 a cup if you're doing it, or 74 grams of oil. Whoops, I forgot to tear. 44 plus 74 is going to be 118, I think. I'm going to add the balance of that in butter to give us some better flavor. Hope I did my math right. Okay. All right. Mix this up. Then we can stage an earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. So I don't mind using a spoon to mix at this level, but when I'm going to mix the two things together then. So gluten is inhibited by oil. So this is kind of a gluten-free zone in this little tar pit, right? And also because we've added vinegar to the water or the aqueous solution, that's also going to have inhibited gluten formation there too. So we'll mix this up here, and then I'll cut them together, and we'll get that other crust put together, right? Cool. So while we're doing this, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the National MPS Society and these groups of diseases I've told you about. Especially during the holiday season, we all think about family and parents and grandparents and kids. Not everybody is blessed with kids that are healthy from birth. I can remember, I come from a family of 6 kids, and I love all my siblings. It's just been so important to me to have them in life. And I can remember my dad saying in kind of a joking way that he was always glad when we were born with all of our limbs and all of our digits. And although he was joking, it absolutely, whoops, we need to add a little bit more of water. That's a little bit too light. I'm not sure what I did, but we're going to add just a little bit. That was his joking way of saying how grateful he was we were all healthy. Not every family is so fortunate. And many people who have rare diseases, these are diseases we can't predict or know about. And the MPS are those kinds of diseases. They're rare. They happen as recessive or X-linked traits. And they're very tough diseases to live with. Tough on families, tough on patients. And that's what I've dedicated my life to developing treatments for. And I'm now working with the National MPS Society as their Chief Scientific Officer. And we rely on work from from the Society to help fund research and to help support families. So I think there is a donation link on my page for this event. Whoops! And I encourage you guys, if you found this helpful and useful, to go to that link and give generously to those who are not as fortunate as we all are. Okay, this is a bit crummy still. Not enough moisture, maybe not enough fat even. Where's my butter? I'm going to add a little bit more butter and maybe a little bit more water. I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe I slipped with the flour. Okay, and I'm just gonna I'm just gonna fold this because I don't want to get it tough, right? I think we'll be good. I think we'll be good. So, remember, 2 to the 5th power, that gives you 2 layers, gives you 32 layers. 3 layers, yeah, this is gonna behave okay. Starting to get a little tough. I'm not going to go for the other layer. Okay. Let's get that flattened out. But the moisture content's good enough. So we got that fixed, which I'm glad of. Get it in get the edges nice and cleaned up. Get it flattened. Not behaving quite as nicely as the other crust, but still okay. Okay. Again, from the center out with your middle part of your fingers. And you can shift the parchment paper, which makes it easy. See all that beautiful modeling? That's going to be a nice layer for us, right? I better check the time. Where are we? Oh, we're doing good. We're doing good. Take a refreshment break even, but I'm going to get this done and get another swig of coffee. Then we'll get our pie built. So when I put apples into the pie, I like to cut a fresh surface from one of the bigger chunks so that the apples that are on the bottom of the pie sort of create a seal, and so that helps. I'm not sure, but I like to delude myself into thinking that it creates a less soggy bottom, because nobody wants a soggy bottom to their pie. And then I will put the rest of the chunks into the pie, and then I will figure out how much liquid I need to add and how much flour it needs for thickening. Because the other thing you don't want when you slice your pie is for all of the liquid to fall out. That's just not a nice aesthetic. The idea that you should take a pie out of the oven and then serve it, that's craziness. I don't know anybody who wants to do that because the pie needs to sit. Preferably, I think a pie needs to sit overnight. And then it will serve more attractively and you will be much happier with the result as well. So I think, let me see, where's my pie tin? I think, yep, that's about the right size. Cool beans. So let's get over here. My pie tin and my flour, or my rolling pin and my flour. Excellento. I wish I could see scrolling of questions, etc. in people, but I can't figure out how to view my feed and have you guys see this here. This is the first time I've done anything like this. If there's enough interest, we can do more of these. I love this. I think it's a blast. There is nothing better than sharing food and recipes and cooking with people. It is just the cat's meow. I'm trying to think when I can remember when I was a boy, we went to this goofy school. It was a Montessori school, as I learned later in life. And we spent a week of Thanksgiving cooking as children. And that was such an important experience. I really valued that. And that, I think, was when I first started to learn about cooking and pies. The other thing I did is, I hate cooking shows now, but when I was a boy and I would stay home sick, sometimes I was actually sick, I would watch television, and there was this goofy open house with Marge Condon, which is sort of this homemaking show, and she would cook, and I loved it. It was so fun. It was amazing stuff growing up in Phoenix there. So we're good. That's ready to go, and I'm going to show you how I like to line the pie with the apples. Whoops, where am I going to put this? Where am I going to put this? Put it there. Okay, coming back to you with the apples and the crust. Okay, where's my kniff? Where's my kniff? Here we go. So, I've got these big sections. I like to cut a flat piece, right? So that it sets down nicely there. And then just line the apple pie with those cut sections so that they'll adhere to the bottom of the crust and maybe help it from not getting too soggy, because again, nobody wants a soggy bottom on their pie crust. Would not be fun. Okay, and these are apples that this may seem strange because this looks like a very full bowl of apples. This is not the same bowl of apples that I just showed you. This was pre-staged so that we didn't have to spend too much time slicing all those apples as part of our class today, right? So we're getting close. Oh, look at all that yummy cinnamon stuff. Yeah, my goodness. So I like to put my pie into a 450 oven. Whoops, that reminds me, I need to go turn the oven up to 450. It's at 350 now. Oh, bake. 450. Start. So how long do you cook a pie for? I want to cook my pie for 10 minutes at 450, and then I turn it down to 350 for another 30 minutes. And after that, I start checking it every 5 minutes. And depending on the apples and the moisture content, etc., it will start bubbling sometime after that 40-minute time point, that 10 minutes at 450 and the 30 minutes at 350. And after it's been started to bubble, you wait 5 more minutes. So at 40 minutes, I check it every 5 minutes, and then after I see it bubble, I will let it go 5 more minutes, and then I'm done, right? So I've got all of these big pieces on the bottom, snug against the crust. Hopefully it will make sure that it won't get soggy. And then I'll just take the others and fill them in. Just fill them in. Right, and you don't have to it doesn't have to lie flat. They will fall down as you cook, and that's another thing about letting it sit overnight, is all the apples will sort of fall into place. Won't be so crazy tall. There we go. Cool. Ooh, this is going to be so good. I don't know how I'm going to eat all this. Pie is absolutely allowed as breakfast food. It is a complete meal in itself, so don't anybody tell you otherwise. And fruit pie is actually my favorite breakfast. That's about perfect, right? And we have all this liquid, so I wanted that to sit. So all the sugar acts in what the scientists will call a hygroscopic force. It will draw liquid to itself and out of the apples. And it will tell you how much flour to add because you'll have the liquid, right? This is flour you're adding to so you get a pie that's not too goopy or runny, right? So it's I don't have any rule of thumb. You add enough, but not too much. That's about right. So it starts to hold its shape, right? Any more than that, no good. And I'm going to add the rest of the butter. So basically this will turn all of the residual liquid that comes out of those apples during the cooking process into a nice sauce. So you don't get a leaky pie, right? I'm going to add a little bit of water because I think maybe that's too thick. There we go. There we go. So when you whip it, it should relax back down into the pan. Okay. Put it over the pie. Great. And then we just dribble it over the pie. And again, I really like cinnamon. Many people don't want this much, so you can modify to your taste. I was fascinated by how many people have such strong feelings about apples and memories about apples when I was on Facebook advertising this. So if you want to learn more about apples, there is this really cool website called orangepippin.com. Orange Pippin is a famous old European apple, English, and that's just the name of the site. And they list all the parentage and the history of all sorts of apples, which is great fun. I really enjoy it. And it will also tell you if you want to grow apples, where you can find some of these old cultivars. Many people laud old-fashioned apples. Indeed, many old-fashioned apples are absolutely awful because they're not really meant to be eaten. They are meant to be stored to keep everybody healthy. Whoops, during winter. So many of the old apples were actually designed to be stored, and they got better with time. So they maintained their shape and they got more flavorful with time. Our modern apples are not that tight. Our modern apples are really only a variety. The old-fashioned people would have called dessert apples, right? Whereas many people, again, they would keep these apples to stay alive in the wintertime, vitamin C, etc. When I lived in Germany, the whole little tiny village was all surrounded by these medieval era apple groves, which were sort of a common thing to the village because that's what would help people. And they were not very tasty. They were good storage and cooking apples. Okay, now we're ready to put the top on this, and I'll show you how that goes. Oh my gosh, coming over. Whoops, 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 whoops. Okay, so that was not very well done, but I was also constrained by flat surfaces. I've just moved into this house, so I don't have very many. Okay, so now we don't crimp this pie crust, right? We just kind of mush it a little bit to the edges. And hopefully this will have a nice crumb to it so that people will not be afraid of eating it. This needs to, there we go. And this may look sort of messy, but I think once it's baked, it actually has a very attractive, kind of wild appeal. There, done. And next thing, we need to put some vents in it, right? And you may want to, whoops, you may want to finish it off with a little bit of sugar. Okay, and cooking parchment's good in the oven, and you can just say, into the oven you go. Whoops, need to lower a shelf. Sorry, I can't hold the oven and the camera at the same time. There we go. Hey Siri, can you give me a 10-minute timer? Is Siri there? Maybe not. I'll just have to look at the clock. So we're going to turn that pie down in 10 minutes. We are only here for an hour, so I've got to show you what this lovely creation will look like in a little bit, right? So we have a pie staged. So this is what it'll come out looking like, which is, I think, yummy. Let me get that down there for you. Cool. And another one of the advantages to this kind of pie is that for presentation purposes, you can actually, because it's on parchment, you can take it out of the tin, right? You can take it out of its pie plate, right? You want to do this with a cool pie, right? And then you can carefully tear the parchment . Well, you might be able to tear it if you could tear things. And you have a lovely pie to present, right? Very different approach. And then the best thing is we have to test it and see whether it's going to be as wonderful as we hope. So will it hold up? Will it not be drippy? Will this have worked out? So let's see how everything did. I'm going to cut myself a generous piece because I love pie and I haven't eaten lunch. Okay. Will that lift out okay, I hope? Now the moment of truth. Oh, lovely. No drips. We have our pie. Let's see how it's done. I think that the fruits held together well, but the important part is, how does it taste? I like the apple texture, a little al dente almost. Oh my gosh, that is so good. I'm amazed at myself. I'm the best. How incredible. I want to remind you also to show you the pie tin that I used. It's a pie tin. Also, pi is an amazing number, right? It is a mathematical description and it is infinite. You cannot reduce it. It never stops. It's like the love you share with people when you make them a pie. So go out and make some wonderful pies this holiday season and share the love and donate to the National MPS Society while you do it. And I have a couple more minutes. We have prizes to announce for the winners of the bake-off for the National MPS Society. 1 second, I got to get my notes. Oh God, I'm going to have, wait a second, I need some more coffee. And I need some more pie. Oh, I'm so happy with this. Oh, how lovely. Okay. So, in the bread category, Chris Clanky, member of the board of directors. There was no favoritism here. She won the sweet rolls for her sweet rolls, the bread category. In the cake category, we have Kimber Heinlings. Oh my gosh, this sounded so good. She made a chocolate strawberry mousse cake. Oh my goodness, that sounds really good. In the cookie category, Erin Fitzgerald won for sugar cookies. In the pie category, Marissa D. This sounded amazing. This really sounded good. Very different pie from mine, but a really amazing thing. Dragon fruit lime curd tart. I have died and gone to heaven. And let's see here. I've got that's it. I hope you guys have all enjoyed this pie class and that you've learned a lot and that you no longer have any fear about cooking pies. And go out and experiment. You can always do things a little bit differently. Keep notes. Good notebook is the most important thing to both science and cooking, right? And you'll be able to reproduce it in the future. Go out, have fun, cook, share the love, do good in the world. We will see you later. Also remember, it's COVID time. Be good, wear your mask, social distance, be safe. Bye for now, everybody. We'll get this posted. Ciao, ciao.